Welcome to the 15th year of the Daynard Fellows program. It's exciting to welcome you all to join us in this panel discussion today. We are truly fortunate to have 4 organizers and activists with us whose careers have significantly advanced our progress in combating sexual harassment in low-wage workplaces here in Boston and beyond. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about them in the minutes ahead, but first I want to introduce myself. I'm new here at Northeastern. My name is Hillary Robinson. I'm a faculty member here at the law school and in the Department of Sociology. I did a dissertation about Uber drivers, a low-wage workforce using an app to work here in Boston and around Boston. And I teach on the subject of law and technology broadly. The format for the discussion will be remarks of about 10 minutes each made by the panelists who are with us, and then I'll direct a question or two at them, and then turn it to you, the audience, for hopefully half the time of questions, and then we'll have a little bit of a summation and leave for the day. So let me introduce our wonderful panelists. So first to my right, we have Jaribu Hill, who is founder and executive director of the Mississippi Workers Center for Human Rights. He is a human rights attorney and a veteran community organizer, an international human rights spokesperson, and a frequent writer and a commentator on human rights themes. He served as the keynote speaker and cultural presenter at numerous international convenings, including the World Conference Against Racism held in Durban, South Africa, and the 1998 Human Rights Defenders Summit in Paris in honor of its 50th anniversary. She was the featured cultural artist at the Frontline Conference in Nantes, France, where she presented a musical and spoken word tribute to Rosa Parks, for whom the event was dedicated. She was also resident poet and legal observer for the 2000 Women in War Crimes Tribunal in Tokyo. And for this occasion, she penned the acclaimed poem Haunting Mirrors, which was made part of the tribunal's final judgment. She was a principal commentator during the acclaimed documentary Murder in Black and White, and is co-author of the Black College Guide and author of Knowledge is Power, a Know Your Rights Manual. She's the founder of the Southern Human Rights Organizers Conference and of the Fannie and Lou Hamer Roundtable and Community Law School's Mississippi Project. After Hurricane Katrina struck Louisiana in 2005, Jaribu established the Southern Relief Fund Witness Delegation to provide support for those in need. She won an important judgment against the Christian Knights of the Ku Klux Klan as former director of the Southern Regional Office of the Center for Constitutional Rights, and has coordinated cutting-edge litigation in areas of housing as a human right and racially hostile work environments. She is the recipient of numerous awards and accolades, and her scholarly works have been featured in numerous publications. We also have with us ROXANA Rivera. She is the daughter of Salvadorian immigrants from the U.S. in her life. She's been organizing low-wage workers and fighting for justice for immigrants and working families for nearly 25 years. She's also been part of and led hunger strikes in California and here in New England, including those that were part of the historic Justice for Janitors struggle in the 1990s. ROXANA spent nearly a decade driving member engagement work and leading the Service Employees International Union at the Local 615 Commercial Division here in Boston. In 2013, the Local 615 merged with 32BJ SEIU, and the then President Hector Figueroa appointed ROXANA as the head of District 615. She was then elected into this role as Vice President by the district's membership. 32BJ of the SEIU represents 20,000 janitors, security officers, and workers in higher education across New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, and has 175,000 members in 11 states and Washington. We also have MILAGROS. She is Immigrant Worker Center Director at the Massachusetts Coalition for Occupational Safety and Health. Previous to this, she has a strong background in human resources, and because of her involvement on the Worker Center program, developed an interest in helping low-wage immigrant workers. She has a thirst for social justice, which took her to become the Worker Center Director since the beginning of 2015, at which time she became immediately active in developing workers' campaigns to ensure the protection of immigrants who work. Currently, in her role as a director, she helped in the recovering of thousands of dollars of wages stolen from workers. And in addition, she has helped victims of sexual harassment and designed a workers' organizer campaign, health and safety committees, and identifying hazards in the workplace. She has a passion for teaching that she developed while working as an organizer, and she teaches workers about their health and safety rights, sexual harassment and discrimination, and using her facilitation skills in training, she believes and expresses that everything begins with knowledge and by knowing your rights personally. She's bilingual, speaks Spanish and English, and has a bachelor's in business management. She is also an OSHA certified trainer and a big believer of women's leadership in the workplace. She also represents the Massachusetts Coalition for Occupational Safety and Health at the National Coalition for Occupational Safety and Health, which is leading a national sexual harassment campaign right now called Our Turn. She is also a member of the United Steelworkers, which is the local 9358 here. Welcome. And finally, we have SOPHIA Hall. She's been staff attorney at Lawyers for Civil Rights, which is a 50-year-old all pro bono law firm where she's been working since 2016. She was promoted to a supervising attorney there in January 2019, and as an experienced litigator, handles a broad range of civil rights matters. She actively represents people of color and immigrant women to protect their rights in the workplace and in the community. And most recently, filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the Boston Police Department on behalf of the family of Terrence Coleman, a Black man living with schizophrenia, who was shot and killed by police when seeking his medical. She also recently filed a landmark sexual harassment lawsuit against a prominent national restaurant chain, expanding the movements that have gone under the hashtag #MeToo and Je También. Her work was spotlighted in a national conference in Chicago called the Modern Day American Worker Conference. And additionally, she has a practice that is growing and focused on dismantling barriers to diversity in publications. Her work is regularly featured in publications, including the New York Times and the Boston Globe. Previously, she was staff attorney with the 8th Action Committee of Massachusetts, which is New England's largest HIV/AIDS service organization. There, she represented low-income individuals living with HIV/AIDS in a wide range of issues and advised the organization on legal matters. She's a graduate of BC Law School, where she served on the National Frederick Douglass Moot Court team. She holds a bachelor's degree from Emory and serves as the chair of the Women of Color Committee for the Women's Bar Association, as the secretary of the Massachusetts Employment Lawyers Association, and she's a member of the Boston Bar Journal's Board of Editors. She has been recognized as one of Boston's top 25 most influential millennials of color, and as an up-and-coming lawyer by Massachusetts Lawyers Weekly. I'll just begin by making one comment before we turn to your remarks and sort of set the tone for the discussion. Anytime we use the term sexual harassment, it makes me reflect about Tim's contribution in the 70s to note that harassment, sexual harassment, is a form of discrimination. So how individuals are treated in their workplace has structural ramifications at the level of the society. It perpetuates the status of women that we see in society at large. So it's wonderful to have activists who have helped individuals in their quest to turn around this scourge that is persistent. I really look forward to hearing how you've done that, and let's get started. Yes.
So if I were in court, I'd be fine for that. I thought I put it on silent. Right for that. Good afternoon. I'm winding down now. I've been with you since Sunday evening. I started doing my Daynard Fellow duties on Monday. And so I'm headed home tomorrow back to the belly of the beast, back to the place where basically and pretty much chattel slavery was certainly born, if not propped up and made prominent. So I bring you greetings from the Mississippi Delta, which is the home of both sets of my grandparents and my parents, and also a lot of people who still languish under the brutal system we know as capitalism, but the byproducts are what we address most often: race terror, race discrimination, and other forms of oppression of people who are already so overburdened with so many challenges and obstacles. I'll just quickly share a story about when I first came to Mississippi. I came on a Skadden Fellowship, and my project was around fair housing. Initially, that was really all that I was going to do, was address issues concerning housing discrimination. I was working with the North Mississippi Rural Legal Services. So when I drove into town, two friend girls, and that's what we call girlfriends, brought me to Oxford from New York City. We drove and we stopped at hotels along the way, but once we got to Oxford, we saw the real deal. There was a banner right near the University of Mississippi, and I say the whole word, I don't say Old Miss, because Old Miss is the nickname of the slave master, Old Mistress. And so every time folks say Old Miss, they're talking about a state-run law school, but they're calling it Old Miss after the slave master's mistress, Old Mistress. So as I drove in, I see a banner that says, "Welcome Elvis Scholars." Okay, so I said, okay, so the song thief has a banner. First thought. Then I saw a banner right next to it, the Mississippi Confederate flag, which is what it is. It has the emblem and then lines out from the side. That's our state flag. It said, "Heritage, not hate, save our flag." So from 1995 to this day, I know that I and others have been working in an extremely hostile environment. Not only because we represent people who are basically every day of their lives victims of all forms of terror, all forms of pushback and setback and setting aside, all forms of annihilation and elimination. We ourselves as advocates, as those who've chosen to be lawyers of consequence, we are working in a hostile work environment. The Mississippi Workers Center for Human Rights was born in December of 1996, after we had a human rights conference that September at the University of Mississippi on the law school campus. We had a featured speaker who was a poultry worker named Ricky Woodall. And Ricky Woodall worked for Tyson Foods. And Ricky Woodall was every day at work having severe headaches and nosebleeds. And when he went to the doctor told him that his headaches and nosebleeds were the result of a precancerous nostril infection and that he had to take this note back to his boss and tell his boss that he only could work with water-based cleaning solutions forever or contract cancer and die. So he goes to his bosses and he tells them this and he shows them the written note from the doctor, and the bosses do what they do. They said, okay, yeah, all right, go back to work. So after several weeks when nothing happened, he found out about OSHA and he anonymously filed his complaint. And when he filed the complaint, he was terminated right while the OSHA inspectors were on site investigating his complaint, which was anonymous. So that's how we were born. We were born because people said we need a human rights organization that addresses the needs, aspirations, and the issues that lower wage African-American workers have and other non-union workers in a state where it's roughly 5%, 4 to 5%. That's how we were born. Cases that we take are steeped in the kind of domestic terrorism that folks label as many things, but in fact, these things where workers are finding nooses in the workplace, where workers are victims of attempted lynchings and rapes in the workplace, This is a zone of terror, and it needs to really be called a zone of terror more often than it is. And I think the reason why there is pushback in terms of the severe language that we need to use is because people are trying to really soft pedal and sugarcoat in the hopes of getting more people to do the work. Maybe they're trying to do false advertisement. It's not as scary as it was back in the day. It is just as scary. And my talk for Daynard was back in the day is today, modern sightings of terror. And so because I used that topic when I was here as a Valerie Gordon lecturer, I certainly dedicate my remarks today to Hope Lewis, who brought me here the very first time, and to Valerie Gordon, whose name and her work brought me here as a Valerie Gordon lecturer. So when I came, I named my talk then, back in the day is today, and I still say back in the day is today. I'll just say quickly as I close that the types of cases that we do are not traditional statutory cases. They're cases that address more than somebody didn't get a promotion, although those are very important cases. I would never lessen the blow in terms of those types of cases, or someone was a woman and a man got a job over a woman. Those are important cases. We see our role as doing cases that address the systemic abuse and rights denial that we're seeing over and over again. So we look at workplace conditions. We look at the fact that there are women raped at work. We look at the fact that there are Black workers who are almost hung at work in the era where we're in the shadows of the period of lynchings. The state that we live in had the largest number of lynchings after slavery. So we look at these cases in that context, that type of terror, that type of oppression, the type of exploitation of workers continues. Many workers can work 15 years and be called temporaries at Uncle Ben's that makes the rice that's put on your table. Many workers can expect to be beaten at work, to be denied basic rights and opportunities. When the shipyard workers that we represented and won a case involving supreme and severe I wanted to say sexual harassment, but co-counsel didn't want to deal with the sex issue, so we only dealt with race. But the racial harassment case that we won resulted in zero tolerance in the workplace for thousands of African Americans. 5,000 out of 12,000 of the workers that we represented were African Americans, and they had endured everything from attempted lynchings to seeing nooses, to seeing drawings of Klansmen, to seeing recruitment signs saying, join your local Klan. And that was 21st century lawyering that we had to do. The case was filed in 2000. So that was not back in the day a long time ago. That was the back in the day is today. The Klan case that we did, all of those cases were 21st century cases. And so I'm delighted to be part of this conversation with my comrades, my sisters in struggle, so that I can learn and grow and share with them and with you some of the obstacles and the struggles that we are waging. And we know that we're going to be victorious, but it's hard sometimes to see that silver lining of victory, but we do believe we are going to be victorious.
Good afternoon. Sorry, I'm a little under the weather, but so I'm Roxana Rivera. So my union represents largely immigrants and people of color, and that do what is seen as low-wage work. And the other challenge, right, is that the majority of our members work for contractors, which makes them even more vulnerable when it comes to taking accountability for this situation. And not only the issue of being issue of being contracted out at a particular work site, it's also just the type of work that just compounds the opportunity for a work condition of sexual harassment. In our workforce, how we see it is this: is janitors, contracted janitors largely clean at night, so they are alone on a particular floor many times. They are in closed areas like bathrooms, right? And that lends itself to, more of this situation in regards to having, in many cases, in most cases, a supervisor that will start out by, asking personal questions and then making inappropriate comments, to asking a particular employee out for a date, or asking them, for sex, and it can grow and escalate to actually then exposing themselves to that employee, touching, and even more. We a couple of years ago, we as a union, we look to, fight for this type of thing to end in low-wage industries. And a couple of years ago, we started a campaign at the airport, at Logan Airport. What we found was a group of workers that were, again, immigrant, low-wage, contracted out, and actually cleaned planes for all our major airlines. And again, the environment, a closed space. So you have janitors that, there's a handful of janitors that board the plane, right, to clean it. And again, it allows for the opportunity for, sexual harassment to happen. And we dealt with two cases of two young women in their 20s that, in one case, one woman was, her supervisor exposed himself to her on the plane. She reported it to her, to management, and they literally ridiculed her, and she was fired. And so we as a union, right, we stepped in, and obviously we think that having a union will allow, employees at least, a forum in which this issue can be addressed, right? And at that moment, that young woman didn't have any recourse. And so, obviously we wanted to make sure that the employer was held accountable. And again, they're a contractor, right? And so we not only have to raise this issue, we have to raise this issue with the direct contractor, with MassCOSH, with the airlines. And we did that through direct action, doing delegations, speaking at, MassCOSH board meetings, doing delegations to the ticket counter of JetBlue, for example. But we also knew, in fighting for a union at that point, at the same time, we knew that we needed to also highlight the issue in the public policy realm. And so we joined with Catherine, Congresswoman Clark, but at the time was actually leading on a third act, right? And one of the workers was able to go with her to the State of the Union address, which was amazing for this young woman. And another, Catherine Clark, came alongside the worker as she filed her NCAD charges. And so, obviously, because at the same time that we're barricading in these fronts, right, we have to look for folks to have that legal representation. And as a union, aside from our non-union organizing, where we see this most rampant, we represent industry that is, that sexual harassment is present, and so we have to have a means in which to basically address that. And we are actually currently, and this is now, we are negotiating for janitors, about 70,000 janitors in about 10 states. Here in Boston, we're not going to be negotiating until next year, but in other states, they're negotiating this year. And we came together and said that we would fight as a whole industry to put in sexual harassment language in all contracts, and we fight it in Philly, we will fight it in DC, we will fight it in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and in Boston. And so that is some ways in which, and obviously we look to have trained folks on our end that can provide the support to the actual employee and legal representation, and also deal with the employers and look at those patterns, because many times, because this is a contracted out industry, many times supervisors will go from company to company, and so we have to kind of centralize that information so that we can actually act on a particular supervisor, which is most of the common cases, more systematically in the janitorial industry.
So thank you again for having me. I feel very honored to share this amazing activist and you, the future of the law, and change what is happening lately with all these political situations and the immigrant workers, families, and everything. You know what I mean, right? So MassCOSH has been around since 1970. It's more as a training with unions and labor movement, but then like in 2008, the organizers back then saw the necessity of the workers that don't belong to a union needs the help to advocate. It needs help to have people that advocate with them, teach them what is organizing, teach them that that you could step up for yourself. And there's when the worker center in MassCOSH began. We have a women's committee. We also have an angel workers, which help, they're leaders that got trained, and they help new workers with situations, if it's an accident in the workplace, or is any sexual harassment or abuse in the workplace, because there were victims in the past. They know how to talk to these new workers and explain to us how they feel back then, so we can approach, because the first thing to do with a sexual harassment victim is we have to have a one-on-one with the victim, because sometimes they know what they're going through, but they are so afraid to talk. Imagine 50% or more than 50% of the women go through sexual harassment, and only 25% of these women are, talk about their stories. And just 5% of these women will move forward and put an official complaint, which is crazy. It's a very low number. So we start doing trainings, and sometimes workers are in the room, and they're going through this harassment, but they don't know, because they feel like they're doing something wrong, or they're provocating. Because the victim of sexual harassment start with bullying. The aggressors start bullying the victim, so the victim, they can control the victim, and then at the end, the victim believes everything. And I'm saying victim because this could be a woman, this could be a man. It doesn't, that doesn't matter maybe. So that's why we have this committee. And we make a investigation research about sexual harassment among the Latino community around the East Boston area, Revere, Lynn, Boston, because we don't have data. We don't have a data that says how the Latino woman is going. We have the Me Too campaign, but there's women that they work, like in office and in other areas, industry. These women work in restaurants under the table. They don't get, they don't have social security, so they don't have any protection in terms of unemployment, or they're very afraid because the owner of the restaurant said, it happens. It happens. So these workers working in cleaning industry, restaurants, and sometimes, like my friend here said, that we collaborate together a lot. They are alone in the places. They are in an office space. The supervisor, because he has a power position, he goes, turn off the light, and start touching her, and then leave the room. And she sometimes don't even know who was until, it's very sad. So over the years, MassCOSH has been in collaboration with 32BJ in all these issues, and also back in the airport campaign, we participated with them, and we asked if we could do trainings for the organizers in the union. And we have this training in the local. There were, I think, like 10 organizers that work in the different areas, and we have a youth program in MassCOSH, and we bring this youth the youth of this program to co-facilitate the training with me, because that program is teaching their rights, the youth rights, which involves the gig economy. They don't know. They just start, working, and they don't know they have rights too. So we prepare these youth members to the work, to the work world when they finish high school and go back to school. So we did this training, and they were amazed how the teens understand the sexual harassment among what is the bullying, what is the when is a sexual harassment direct, or is becoming, start doing that. So we did these trainings among the union brothers. We marched with them in the airport campaign. We did a peace rally in the JetBlue terminal, which is the state police asked us to move. But it was very interesting, because what we want to do with these trainings and among the workers is to bring an awareness about sexual harassment, about that is real, that is happening, and that you don't have to feel ashamed if you're going through that. You need to step up. You need to go to a worker center, to your union rep. It's time to talk about it. So within this training with the union, we went with the worker to the MCAD, the Department of Discrimination, when she was going to put the former claim in and it was very, very emotional for everybody, because she was so afraid. And then when she saw all these brothers and sisters, or these organizers together supporting her, she felt like, yeah, this is the right thing that I have to do. We also marched with my friend right here, also with another case in downtown. So we are here to spread the word and teach and train and make the awareness in men and women in the community, because it's not only sometimes we think maybe it's cultural, because sometimes I'm from Puerto Rico, but then we see a lot of people from Central America that says, oh, my grandmother said, if a man can say something nice to me, I'm not gonna be married anymore, never ever, and it's not like that. And we need to change that. We need to change that mentality, that we need, it's different. If you don't feel comfortable with a comment, with the way that they look at you, and if you don't feel comfortable, there's when start these abuses. So, and this also going back to the trash project, we are hoping to create a report based on the data that we recover. We trained 10 women from the Worker Center members, and they went through a certification about human aspects and also went through the process of an IRB. And they were the ones that were doing the interviews with the women. It was totally confidentially. And they were like, when we come back together to the room to share, what the found outs and everything, they were like, there were women that never talked to anybody, not even their sisters, nobody, not even a mother, a husband. They went through that situation and they just quiet. And we give them the trust. We have to gain the trust of these women, and they talk about it the first time in their lives. So it's really sad, and it's happening again. And the political army that we're living right now, the immigrant workers and the local, and because now the employers have permit to do whatever they want with the workers, and they just said, I'm not going to pay you. If you don't go to bed with me, I'm going to fire you, do whatever you want, or I call ICE. So I have faith in you. And I also have I wish that in the future, the sexual harassment abuse can go over also the workers' compensation. Because it becomes so bad. We have victims that have been 3 years, and they never go back to their life. They have to sleep with medication for sleep, medication to go through the day. So yeah, that's one of my. I hope you can help. Thank you.
I'm pretty loud, but just in case. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm honored to be here. These are some really phenomenal women. If you had asked me 10 years ago when I was sitting where many of the students in the audience are sitting today, if I'd be here, I would have thought absolutely not. I think what's most exciting about talking to young people who really are passionate about pursuing these types of careers is knowing that it's totally possible and that the need is there. This is a cool time to be a civil rights lawyer. This is an important time to be a legal warrior. And there are places out there that need you, that want you, that welcome you, particularly a place where I work called the Lawyers Committee. Well, formerly the Lawyers Committee, now the Lawyers for Civil Rights. It's hard to remember after 50 years to change the name. And so, what I think is important to share today, thinking about just kind of touching on some of the topics that have already been covered, is that I'm really fortunate to do this work because I think it's such a great body of work that encompasses my own personal morals and goals. As an organization, I am an impact lawyer. So my goal is to take all of these stories that I hear day in and day out and think about a way to amplify the impact using the law. So the law is our tool, it's our treasure trove, and we think about how to use it creatively to make widespread change. But I think to do that really effectively, you have to be a community lawyer. You have to believe that the people that are closest to the harm need to be closest to the solution, and that might not be you, and that's okay. In fact, in my opinion, that's the way it should be. I like to tell my clients all the time, you're the captain of the ship, I'm just helping you navigate, because that's what I believe that my role is. And so in sexual harassment in particular, just by show of hands, how many of you actually know when the Me Too movement started? So many people are amazed to learn that #MeToo actually started in 2006 by a Black woman for women of color and for low-wage workers. And that when, the Harvey Weinsteins of the world and everybody got onto the news, that wasn't actually the beginning of the movement. And so what I think is fundamentally important in doing this work, which is why I brought this federal lawsuit for 5 immigrant women that were back-of-the-house workers, all from Central American countries, all undocumented, was because I think it's really important to remember that low-wage women of color experience sexual violence at work. 80% of them report experiencing sexual violence at work. That it is every day. It is persistent. It is in every walk of life. It is in every workplace. And the only people that you see talking about it, unfortunately, on the news happen to be high-wage workers, prominent white-collar workers, white women. But there just weren't people that looked like me, and there weren't people that looked like my clients getting the spotlight to talk about these issues. And to be honest, if you can't consider all of the barriers that go into this work, and that means thinking about cultural competency, thinking about language, thinking about being undocumented, and what does the increase in immigration enforcement mean? If you can't really look at this problem holistically, you're never going to solve it. Because those are the reasons why so few women report. Those are the reasons why big companies having an anti-sexual harassment policy doesn't really make a difference. It's the reason why bringing trainers in, if it's not meaningful, if it's not repeated, if it's not effective, if it's not multilingual, doesn't matter. If you are not thinking about this problem holistically, if it's not the trainers, the employer lawyers, the employee lawyers, the people, the sort of quasi-judicial people, so the people at MCAD, the people in the courtrooms, the mediators, the arbitrators, if everybody's not on the same page to recognize that we have a cultural problem here, we have to shift cultural norms and day-to-day behaviors. And you can be a man, you can be a woman, or identify in whichever way makes you comfortable, but you need to be part of the solution, because if we're not all at the table, then we're going to still be talking about this 10 years from now. And guess what? There'll be new young people sitting in your seats that won't know that the hashtag #MeToo has long existed before they got to law school. And so a lot of the work I do tries to give voice to that. So the women that I represent were the first kitchen workers to bring a federal lawsuit for sexual harassment in the country. And we really widely publicized our case because it happened the day after Mario Battelli kind of nationally got kicked out of his restaurant for allegations of sexual harassment. But nobody was really talking about restaurant work there. And so what we did is we put on a press conference, and I brought 28 national reporters, multilingual outlets, to our very, very small nonprofit office. And we gave our clients an opportunity to tell their stories. And for many of them, what they told me was that they didn't even know what hashtag #MeToo was. They also didn't know what hashtag Yo También was. So it wasn't a question of language barriers. It was literally like, oh yeah, people are leaving in the middle of the day to march for me for Women's March. I gotta go to work. I can't get off of work to go march. Like, they fundamentally didn't know about some of the organizing that was existing around this issue because it wasn't trickling down to them. But they're the people that have been living through these experiences for so many years, and are people who can firsthand tell you it doesn't matter if you have an HR department, because guess what? Restaurants don't have them in the restaurant.
That's right.
This company that I sued, which is a company of Landry, so I sued McCormick and Smith, particularly the Faneuil Hall location in Boston, Mass. That restaurant doesn't have an HR office. Anybody want to guess where their where their HR location is? Nothing? Florida. Texas. Oh. Anybody want to guess what language the HR process is in? Only English. So for over 500 employees throughout the nation, they have one HR office in Texas, and they had two bilingual employees to serve everyone. And all of the investigations, if you're lucky enough to figure out how to navigate that sexual harassment policy, they somewhere in a hand. All of those investigations happen telephonically. They happen with men in the room, sometimes the same men that you're making the allegations against, and typically with the translator because nobody can understand any other language but English. Does that seem like an effective means of countering sexual harassment in the workplace? Absolutely not. And so these are the kind of conversations that can come to light when you are thinking about being a community lawyer. When you select employees that otherwise get overlooked, that otherwise do not have a voice, do not have a platform. These are the kind of stories that I think make people recognize just how complex this issue is. And you think it's bad enough when you hear the stats about how few people report and how many occurrences there are. I think actually maybe a week or so ago, you guys might have seen in the paper, I think the Globe did a piece about how, I'll get the number wrong, but it was an astronomically high percentage of women whose first sexual encounter is forced. This stuff is happening to everyone, the people that look like you, the people that don't. And if it happens to, if this is a lived experience for people who are fortunate enough to be in law, you just think about all the vulnerable people who are exactly like what I was talking about. The janitorial workers that work alone and custodial in commercial sites with nobody watching them. The people cleaning buses when nobody's watching them. People that work in homes. It's just, there's so many really vulnerable populations. And if we are going to come up with an effective solution, we have to take all of that into account. And so, being a civil rights lawyer today, working where I work, doing this kind of work, this is the way that I have to think about practicing law. And that is not something that I wake up and just know how to do. That is something that I have to be patient and listen to the people who experience that harm tell me what they need. Tell me what their problems are. And then I help them craft legal strategies around it. And in federal court, lots of employee lawyers know you don't really want to be in federal court, unfortunately, even in our circuit. But that's the places where you have to be sometimes to make that big change. That's where all the employer lawyers are removing your cases to. So you better figure out how to educate those judges and educate those juries. All of this challenge is more than just having bad law that we need to advance. It's more than just thinking about preemptive actions that we can take that are culturally competent, that can start to eradicate barriers to reporting. It's coming at us from all sides. And we really need people that are creative, that are empathetic, and that are okay playing second chair, right? That are okay playing second chair to the people who need us to do this work and letting them have the first chair, and letting them have the first voice and backing them up. So I'm super excited to be here today. I'm happy to chat with some awesome women and hopefully get you guys all to become civil rights lawyers and legal warriors very, very soon.
How lucky we are to have this great panel. So I'll just make one quick remark and then I'm going to toss it out to you for questions. The sort of subtitle, if you will, of the talk today was Demystifying the Law. And it occurred to me that across the bookends of lawyers and community organizers, that we heard that demystifying the law in this context of sexual harassment means not only bringing the law to the workers, which could mean financial access or combating cultural assumptions about what behavior is acceptable, tolerated in workplaces. It also means bringing the workers to the law, which could be finding those in need in closed spaces and off time that aren't the typical ones we work, perhaps as sort of daytime folks. We didn't touch very much on finances, and so I wonder if we could have a few comments about how you fund your work, where the need is, and whether, just a little bit of a discussion about that as a barrier, perhaps, to bringing the law to the workers, or the workers to the law. Thank you. Yes.
I also wanted to answer her question because, sometimes lawyers run off at the mouth, and I know I do that, and then forget to answer the question. And before I answer that question, I did want to bring into the room Sandra K. Norman, who is the woman that I'm privileged to represent, and we're scheduled for trial in a very, very powerful region of Mississippi called the Northeast region. We're going to be in Monroe County in a city called Aberdeen, which is one of the Klan sort of epicenters of our state. And we're going before a judge, an Article 3 judge, and we have two women judges. The Article 3 judge is a white female, and the magistrate is a white female as well. And we sued this company called Delta Bus Lines. Delta Bus Lines is a black-owned company. The hands that touch this 56-year-old African-American woman are black hands. The owner of the company is African-American, and the supervisor who allowed it is African-American. So I won't lie to you and say that that was not problematic for me and that was not something that broke my heart to know that I had to address it. But I think the important thing that I come away with in this movement work, in this movement lawyering work, is that we have to continuously do the intersectional work. We have to talk about race, class, and gender. We can't only talk about race, we can't only talk about gender, and we certainly can't only talk about those who are economically advantaged. And I'm so glad that SOPHIA brought up the history of Me Too. It's so important to know that that history is bound up with the oppression
and the exploitation of Black women's bodies. So important that the first person to utter the Me Too phrase was an African-American woman, Tawana Burke. Indebted to her, and we all should be, for the contributions that she's made. And often she's not even mentioned in the discussion and the dialogue, although she gets a fair amount of speeches that she gets to do. I'm saying that every time you talk about the Me Too era, you have to bring up Tawana Burke. You have to bring up the fact that Black women are disproportionately, from the slave cabins back in the day till now, really, really. So Sandra Norman is one of those women. She worked alone, and when my sister to my right said they work alone, yes, in isolation, in the shadows, and the EOC investigator had the nerve to tell her she didn't have a case because she didn't have any witnesses. And opposite counsel put that in the pleadings and the summary judgment motion. Well, it should be dismissed because she didn't have any witnesses. Well, when was the last time a harasser announced to the room, I'm getting ready to grab this woman's behind and her breast. I want folks to come and check it out. Never, ever, ever are women on public display when this happens to them. So Sandra Norman was that type of victim. She was touched, fondled, grabbed. She was told dirty things like, I like your breast, I want some milk. She was asked for oral sex every day for 2 years of her working life. This is what she was subjected to. And when she filed her first EEOC charge of sex discrimination under Title VII, she was fired 2 months later. So then she filed a second charge of retaliation. We're scheduled to go to trial on a case in February where the arrogant defendant's lawyer had the nerve to miss the deadline for filing a motion for summary judgment. 18 days later comes back and tries to get in the door, and of course we filed a motion to strike. This is serious example. This is a serious example of the type of repression that we see people facing every day in these workplaces. So while she's only a single plaintiff and we're in Mississippi, we were funded by the National Women's Law Center through the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund. We received funding for the discovery. We received a little bit of funding for legal fees, and all of our expert fees are paid. All of our investigator fees are paid through the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund. So I only do commercials when people are righteous. I don't do commercials for everybody, but I will say they are looking for other cases. And this is the first case that they will be doing in Mississippi. So obviously they're looking for Deep South projects as well. So if you're intending to go that way, I say please do it. And we sued multiple plaintiffs, multiple defendants in the circuit, the Fifth Circuit, where that is absolutely not allowed. But, you know, Dred Scott style, Harriet style, we said, you know, in essence, F the law. We're going to sue anyway. And if you throw the defendant out, we'll drag his behind into court under a subpoena. He'll sit in the witness box and he'll be shivering and shaking like the dog that he is. So we are not worried that on a motion for judgment on the pleadings, we might get him pushed out as a defendant. He'll be in that witness box as a defendant. So we just really want to we'll keep you posted as we go forward. And of course, the Northeastern community is our community. We will keep them posted and let you know how we make out.
People that believe in the cause and justice, and we receive donations. We have been attacked also by the new president and calling funds in through OSHA. OSHA give us help us a lot with the public safety, occupational things and programs, but it's more from union brothers and sisters in the union. Founders, contracts from different, like from DPH, different universities. We also do projects together, donations from members or people that believe in the cause and they become sustainers donors and fundraising. So yeah, if you would like to make a donation, you go to MassCOSH. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, this is more like what people feel. They move to do it. Attorneys pro bono attorneys, they help the workers because they believe in the community and the workers, and we trust them a lot. And so it's basically, yeah, not direct from the government, but it's more like outside.
Yeah, we also have a fairly unique model, which again, you heard earlier. So all my work is pro bono. You know, our clients don't pay $1 to get any of the legal representation that we provide, even for lawsuits. We have one that's gone up and down the First Circuit multiple times. It's been ongoing for 15 years. Those clients don't ever pay $1 to their attorneys for attorneys' fees or costs. And we're very fortunate to be able to do that work because money is the primary barrier for people to be able to seek legal representation. But the Lawyers Committee was born out of the basement of the Boston Bar Association 50 years ago. And the goal was to give big law firms and private attorneys an opportunity to do pro bono work. And so they created a hub where we were close to the clients and we could find the pro bono cases and they could co-counsel with us to do the work. So in partnership with 22 large member firms in the Boston area, we currently have 40 cases on our docket and every single one of our clients is represented for free.
And just to add to that, from the very beginning of our legal career, we have always had partners who contract with us on complex cases. So for our race and sex discrimination cases, we recruit from the progressive law community to have lawyers come and help us because we only have one full-time lawyer on staff, and that's me. So when we do these race and sex cases, we have lawyers who help us for a small percentage of what they would normally charge, and then hopefully through a verdict or settlement that would include fees, we are able to compensate them further. But we do really need lawyers who are willing to take these cases and not worry about the expense of the case so much as there are organizations out there like the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund. We do need them to. We need you to consider taking these cases because these are the cases that are going to reshape and change laws that woefully need to be changed. So we're hoping to cut some new law around the issue of multiple defendants being named in a lawsuit where the company has been sued. We believe that there is a need for that to be changed. And some circuits already, I don't know why I left New York, Second Circuit, that is not a problem, that you can name as many people as you can get on the printed page as defendants, but the Fifth Circuit has said over and over again, cannot name also the employees because it is the company that has to be held liable. But we've run across a few nuggets thanks to some crackerjack law clerks that have done serious underground research. We found a couple of cases, we threw them in there. We did a David and Goliath type approach, and we said, well, if they kick him out, we'll drag him in another way. But I think it's important to have roundtable discussions about the areas of law that woefully need to be changed, and really remember that for a long time, people on this very stage were not allowed to even enter a courtroom because we were not considered human. I remember the Dred Scott case. I remember how that still prevails today. And we can cut new law. We can break through, but we really do need your help. We need you thinking outside the box, and we need you to sign up for co-ops that address issues like the ones that we've all addressed on this stage. I've been privileged to have Northeastern co-op students in the past, but I am surely wanting to welcome more. So I promised I would help to do that commercial. So please consider coming to the deep, deep South. Don't just go to Atlanta, though it has its problems too. Don't just go to Mardi Gras in New Orleans or DC, where you can go to the Capitol, but come to the off the beaten path areas like North Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama. Try it out, even if it's only for a closure. Look at me, I got to live there forever, but you only have to do it for a co-op, so please think about it.
Right now.
We do. We take co-op applications every semester. We regularly have a fall and a spring co-op in Northeastern. And if you just have questions about what that looks like and what kind of work you can do, I'm happy to chat with people. Just shoot me an email.
Yeah, just in regards to the question about finances, so we're a work organization. We have membership, right, that basically fund, the union and basically pay dues, and so that covers representation, but also the issue around, it funds our organizing, right? Which, we do have, we do have a robust legal counsel that works directly for the union. We've been able to pull our resources, not from kind of all the states that we represent, that they basically come together to basically, try to be on the cusp of how far we are pushing.
Do you take co-ops to be fair in that?
So I'm not sure. Like, I know. So,
yes, the answer is yes. Okay.
And we do, we help workers file charges, or and at times to seek outside legal representation.
All right, so let's turn it to the audience. I have questions. I think we're Facebook live streaming, so it didn't work. We're recording. So do we have a roving microphone to get or I can just repeat the question? Okay, please go ahead. Yes.
So I just wanted to follow up on the comment. Milagros and Sophia said, so Milagros, you were talking about the emotional repercussions of the sexual harassment stuff that you see in your day-to-day work. And Sophia, you talked about developing a holistic perspective. And I'm wondering in your particular fields, whether that's as organizers or leaders with organizing sensibilities, what you see as the limitations of your particular fields and what maybe you do to maybe partner with other disciplines, or what kind of interdisciplinary partnerships you have in order to address the emotional stuff, the cultural stuff that maybe isn't addressed by law, by organizing.
The question is about collaborating with other organizations, including, but it sounds like also beyond lawyers, where the limitations.
Yeah, I can. Thank you for that question. So volunteers, students, and it's it's not money, directly, but it also, besides helping if it's a social worker student, or if it's from psychology department student, and you come to volunteer with a knowledge, professional knowledge, because we are organizers. Who cares? I mean, who take care of us? We have to hear all these big stories and troubles and all the pain. We feel all the pain of these workers. But if we receive, we have in the past, and we are working on that. Volunteers from studies from psychology departments. Also, we work with the clinics, the hospitals, the social workers departments. When they identify the victim and we work together. They take care of the psychological part, and we take care of the work part, right? And in terms of the collaboration with the attorneys, the organizers, we are limited because there's legal issues and legal confidentiality, that if we participate in those conversations, we can become witness. So we have to be very careful with that and give the space to the attorneys to do their job. And if they need anything, or they see that there's something that we can help, then we come in. But we are the bridge between the worker and the attorney to put those pieces together.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So I think Milagros mentioned to you the case that I mentioned where we were suing McCormick and Schmidt. Those plaintiffs were brought to us by worker centers, by MassCOSH, by Chelsea Collaborative, and they were actually in the process of marching and protesting about mandatory arbitration agreement contracts and about like OSHA violations, sexual harassment violations that were happening in the workplace at McCormick, and that's how those clients came to our attention. And so I think for much of our work, I have found that having relationships with organizers, keeps me aware of what's happening on the ground, that like they physically are the ear to the ground to know what's happening, to know how to bring legal issues to bear. But again, a lot of it is being able to have someone else that you can follow their lead and recognize the benefits there. One thing that's a little attenuated, but I think is kind of interesting thinking about emotional distress damages. One place where the law is really, I think, not yet caught up is in the way that we assess damages. And so, for emotional distress damages, you'll soon learn that it's a really arbitrary assessment of like how much money you should give. Like how much is somebody deserving of when they no longer like to bake? And that's what they used to do, and that was a passionate hobby that they had. But now because of an experience, they're depressed or they're anxious, and they no longer bake. Or they no longer go on family vacations. Or they no longer go out and dance. Like these things that are considered not easily quantifiable in emotional distress damages are a really interesting concept in how you make a jury understand the value of giving damages in those space, particularly for sexual harassment victims who lots of times, for lots of immigration reasons, may not necessarily want to be bringing back wage claims for pay, so they may only have an emotional distress damage assessment. One of the things that I've seen that I think the law hasn't yet caught up to is jurors want something quantifiable, and so what a juror will sometimes do is they will think about how much money do you make, and let me say 1 times that, and that's what could be an acceptable emotional distress damage. But obviously, there's a huge variety in what that number might be if you are a white-collar $150,000 employee versus a janitorial staff who makes $30,000 a year. Like, is it fair that that person experienced sexual assault on the workplace, but the only way a juror could assess what an emotional distress award should be was to say 1 or 2 times 30,000 versus 1 or 2 times 150,000. So I think that's a place where, like, we need advocates. We need people talking about that in the public. We need op-eds written about that. We need to push jurors. We need to push individuals to think differently about how they assess money, how they think about what emotional distress damages are. And I don't think that's something that a lawyer can per se lead. We can certainly encourage that in openings and closings, but those are the things that activists, organizers really help with, journalists help with, students help with, to start to change concepts around the way that we assess how we should actually penalize these people that engage in these behaviors.
So that sounds like a student note or a law review article. Just like a co-author.
I just want to pick up real quick on what Sophia said. First of all, intentional infliction of emotional distress requires outrageous conduct. What is more outrageous than what we have been hearing and what you've been? Problem is, it's a 1-year statute of limitations in the state. And when our client came to us, she was already past the 1 year. So we can only raise state claims that sound in negligence, like negligent retention, negligent in hiring, negligent training and supervision. It would have been so much more powerful if we were able to raise that issue of outrageous conduct through intentional infliction. So there's an area where we should be challenging the limitations themselves. The statute of limitations does not often lend itself to getting the kind of recovery that folks deserve when they are ultimately and absolutely victimized. So yeah, I agree with you. I think we have to push the envelope. We have to really demand more in terms of time frames and periods. We are in the school of folks who feel like rape should not have a statute of limitations on it. We know that rapes of children under 12 in the state of Mississippi, supposedly you can be executed. And of course, I'm not for the death penalty at all, but it's interesting how under 12 years old, if you rape a child under 12, you can get death penalty. But you can rape a grown woman, and I encourage you to do 3 things. Watch these 3 movies. Hope and Redemption, the story of Lena Baker. Was a black domestic worker who got into a tussle with her boss trying to keep him from raping her. She grabbed a gun and it accidentally went off and she was executed in the 40s. The Rape of Reese Taylor is another really important film. And I saw Rape on the Night Shift at a MassCOSH conference. So Rape on the Night Shift, I hope I'm saying the title correctly, is a powerful film that you definitely should have it, see it, have discussions around that so we can address these issues, bring forward some better laws that protect victims of these horrific crimes.
Yes, I just want to note that there was another idea there for a contribution in writing. As students, you have the time to do this now, which was a piece about the limitation of statutes of limitations around IID, which means that claims have to come. Please.
Yeah, thank you all for your participation and know you left us also with a chart of how we can change things to better workers. But I just want to underscore Jaribu's point about, and all your points really, about intersectionality of what you're doing, and just call attention to HEAL, which is an emerging national coalition around health, environment, agriculture, and labor. And it brings the labor part. You have the food chain workers, the micro workers, all dynamics of labor in the meat packing facility. It looks at the agriculture. What is a production system that then bleeds itself into the type of abusive labor conditions, right? And I really feel, coming from North Carolina, where we have, is it the second largest Jaribu meat packing facility?
Yes.
At Smithfield?
Yes.
And coming right off of the concentration feedlots. And so when you look at the interconnectedness between Black farmers and land laws, and then who then gets the land, who then increase their production system, and what is the best, because you're having problems with. And so when you have an unregulated agriculture production system that is seen as a farm, that then is out of the reach of the EPA and other regulated activities, and you can begin to make that connection with the kind of abusive labor condition, because it creates a culture, right? And so I just feel that to the extent that lawyers are lawyering, that there is this national piece that we begin to kind of work with each other to develop platforms or planks of policy that we can begin to move through, legislations or other ways of talking about it and other ways of organizing. I think that's critically important. I think Sophia, Lawyers Committee, right? Yes. Thank you for opening a Southeastern Regional Office in North Carolina. I see a lot of complementarity with the work that we're already doing there on confining feedlots and that production system and workers' rights and the environment. And also to Jaribu's point about bringing her workers' rights conference to North Carolina, I'm just thinking how amazing that's all going to be. And it would be really
December
wonderful if we get more co-op students coming, looking at the intersectional work with land laws, the environment, and labor. I think those would be really a brilliant space to cut your teeth in what I feel are really 21st century issues, because it also undergirds that production system, what we are doing with our planet Earth. And for those who are interested, we would welcome the labor. Welcome.
Well, we had just a wonderful comment from our other fellow, and I won't even attempt to sum it up, but it's a comment. About gestured at the idea, or that it's a specific form of capitalism that lends itself or is involved with this form of oppression through sexual harassment, and that we need to be having that conversation, about reforming capitalism or inserting a certain kind of human values. So, are there any more questions from the audience? Comments? Okay, so I'll just end with two quick ones for the panel. One is, did I miss anything? How can we follow your work and also spread the word about it? Is there a Twitter account for each of you that I can write on the board? Doesn't have to necessarily be social media.
Yeah, so we have a Facebook, Lawyers for Civil Rights. You can find us online. We're Lawyers for Civil Rights Boston. And if you'd like to get on our listserv, our email, all of our legal work is done in conjunction with the media strategies. Because again, if people don't know about what you're doing, then they don't know that they have rights. They don't and they don't have a platform for their voice, for their experience. So you can also get on our listserv so that you can get all the press releases that we send out every time we file a lawsuit.
We have 3 Facebook pages. my page, which is, if you want to go there. But I also have 2 organizational Facebook pages. There's no telling what might come up on my page, I'm just saying. Depending on what day of the week it is. If it's September 15th, you're going to see a tribute to. If it's the day Fred Hampton was killed in his bed, you might see a picture of Fred Hampton. There's just no telling. But we also have the Mississippi Worker Center. Right, we have 2 pages. We have a website that is really needing work and needing help. So if anybody's technologically savvy and wants to help us resurrect our website, we surely could use your help. And I have Twitter, but I'm not really faithful to it. It's Truth-Teller 777, I think. Teller 777. I only have a less than 100 followers, I think. But that's because I don't tweet. But I understand other people tweet my stuff back. So I said, well, I'm not really on Twitter. Oh, yes, you are on Twitter. Well, I don't know that because I'm not. But there you go.
I mean, we all also have a Facebook, Twitter, but I think what would be easier, I think it would be just for folks to be online, and it will list all the ways in which folks can access us.
Yes, and also MassCOSH is masscosh.org. We have Facebook and Twitter, but if you go directly to masscosh.org, there's links that connect you to all the Twitters and also the work all connected, and you can see our work. And yeah.
Oh, so we're lawyersforcivilrights.org, the website. And then we also have a Lawyers for Civil Rights Facebook.
Did I already write this? Okay.
And Northeastern was really put on the blast, Northeastern University School of Law, because we reposted the flyer about my coming as a Daynard, and we got over 600 likes and comments, and yeah, so I mean, you all are on the map, certainly on my page. That might not be in a good way, but I'm just saying.
Sorry, it's 7-1.
Okay. Okay, and that shows you how often I got the first part right, but that was wrong. Thank you so much for saying that. Us, what we're most, this room, that there are emerging lawyers to be, lawyers who are already lawyers, just got to get that bar card. And then, as soon as you get that bar card, I find out. And everybody else, you know me, I am going to be contacting you. So I'm hopeful about these experiences, sitting in a room, listening to the stories that these brought up to us, and how that translates into working together in terms of coalition work, in terms of unity work, where we can really make a difference. And I will say I was fortunate not to be a lawyer right out of college. I was an organizer for a couple of decades before I even went to law school. So I usually don't make the separation like others do between a lawyer and an organizer, because as I'm listening to Sophia and the other sisters, I know doggone well Sophia is an organizer. Yes, she's a lawyer, but I listen to the way she does the lawyering. So I just think that whole way that we're rigidly defined should be uncovered and exposed as a privilege, and we shouldn't just see ourselves as lawyers.
Like one famous president.
Whoa.
Who also was an organizer and then a lawyer. Okay, most optimistic, bright spots.
I feel like just that collective action through collective, we can actually win, and we'll continue winning, and that's something that I've witnessed myself over the last 25 years and continue to believe in as more and more people come in to the work that we collectively do around issues such as sexual other things. And I would say one of my first experiences organizing, because I was in college, and I was tutoring at a school where the parents were freaked out because of there was immigration raids, and that's kind of how I got involved. And then the union came to support our efforts around fighting back the immigration raids, and said, well, do you want to be an organizer? But in that, and I was like, what's that? I was, literally. But one of my first experiences was actually a lawyer actually come around those immigration raids, said, I've been looking at this, I've been trying to address it, but I needed a community organization to come do something here. And
the law to the workers.
Yeah, and so we organized a volunteer group around to fight back these immigration raids, parents to the school, and with that lawyer, and we're really able to back. And so just understanding working together, legal and with organizers is very powerful.
So I have to say that seeing all of you here in this room means that you care, that you want to know more about community and the struggles of the community. Again, you're my hope, and I'm serious. Because you need to get involved in the community as well. It's not just here, the administrative situations. The real struggle is right here. And you having you in this room means that you care about these rules. So keep on working, do volunteer with the community. So you're welcome to come to MassCOSH and spend time with the workers. Don't separate one thing from another because they're all together, okay? I encourage you to do that, and I'm very happy to see you all here. And that's gonna give you, if you do that, you're gonna be one step forward, and the other students that they don't connect with the communities. And that's something that don't let behind.
So I think I'm most excited about just how prominent the issue of sexual harassment has become, from the Kavanaugh hearings to Antonio Brown to everyday lawsuits and everyday experiences and interesting Globe editorials. I think there are lots of people that want to say that they think that there's not a backlash, that we've gone too far and there's this sort of conservative effort. Me Too is just getting out of hand. But I actually think that when people see themselves reflected back in issues and experiences, that makes them change their psyche and their emotional thought process about an issue. So, for example, the reason diversity matters, right, is because when Black and brown people see other people where they want to be that look like them, they believe that those paths are possible. I think the same is true for sexual harassment. The more that people talk about it prominently, despite the outcome, the more that women and more that people will believe that there is actually cultural shifts that need to be changed. I am actually doing something wrong. There is actually a problem. There is actually a discussion worth having. And if you don't have those spaces to start changing thoughts and minds, then I fundamentally believe that the law and none of this really matters. So the more we see it, the more we talk about it, the more that we can make change. And I think that this has been a really amazing last 2 years in seeing how much we are talking about this issue.
Okay, so I'm going to close the event. We're so grateful for you. Thank you for bringing yourself and your work to Northeastern, and we will stay in touch.